Hey, Larken Rose here. This video should not be necessary, but apparently it is, because a lot of people don't grasp the concept of freedom of speech. There's a very important distinction here. Whether you think something is good and whether you are morally justified in using violence against somebody for something they did. So, for example, if somebody says something you think is offensive, like if somebody is celebrating the murder of Charlie Kirk and you think that's horrible, you have the right to condemn that and say that person's a dumbass or rude or whatever. You have the right to say nasty things about him too. You don't have the right to go punch him out. That's violence. That would make you the bad guy. From that concept, everything you need to know about the concept of free speech will flow. But a lot of people don't think in principles or logic, so they fall for stupid crap. Like Pam Bondi, goofball clown for Mango Mussolini, out there a while ago. Everybody called her out for it, but saying, oh, we can't have hate speech. We have to crack down on hate speech. Like, utterly arbitrary, utterly meaningless, and completely immoral. Even if somebody says something that really is hate speech, whatever the hell that means. If somebody comes out and says, I hate black people, it's still wrong to use violence against that guy. You have every right to say, well, you're a dumbass, and you can say that, and I can say that, and we can, say whatever the hell you want. And you still don't have the right to silence him by force. Ironically, Pam Bondi was pushing this crap in response to the murder of Charlie Kirk, somebody who came right out and said, no, you have to allow hate speech. If you don't allow hate speech, we don't have freedom of speech. Freedom of speech doesn't mean you're free to say anything that the ruling class decides is nice and good and true. It literally means the exact opposite. It's there to protect things that people don't want to hear and don't like. So that should be obvious. Hopefully lots of you at least understood that. Now, after Pam Bondi said this about hate speech, a reporter asked Mango Mussolini, well, who's she talking about? What hate speech? And this dictatorial dumbass says, maybe you, maybe she's coming after you. That is a threat of government violence against somebody for what they say. And Trump does that all the time because he doesn't give a crap about the First Amendment or freedom of speech at all. He thinks that being critical of him is illegal. And this is not new. Like, it's making the news now. He said this ages ago about skits on Saturday Night Live. I think that was during his first term. The court should look into it. This can't be legal. He was already talking about using state violence against people for making fun of him because he thinks like a dictator. So that's wrong. That's censorship. That's a violation of freedom of speech. And that's true even if some show or some whatever is massively politically biased and constantly pushing one side. You're allowed to do that. It's wrong to use violence against somebody for being very biased in their opinions in whatever topic. So, and of course, Trump and his stooges are violent control freak idiots, so they don't care about that. Whether or not he understands the concept, I don't know. He's also an idiot, but he's a tyrant, doesn't at all care about it. There's this thing called freedom of association. Not only can you say what you think, but you get to decide who you trade with, who you give your business to, or boycott them, who you work for, or you can decide to quit, who you hire, or you can decide to fire somebody, including based on things that person says. That person can exercise their right to say their opinion, and you can then exercise your right to disassociate from them and say, you don't work for me anymore. I think what you said was obnoxious and rude and whatever. Because nobody has the right to force you to associate with somebody else. And this is, again, true regardless of how smart or dumb the opinion is on either side. So if somebody comes along and says something that the left thinks, oh, that's so offensive, you should be canceled. If some stupid company fires somebody for saying something, they have the right to disassociate from that person. They don't have the right to go beat the person up, but not associating with somebody and not trading with somebody is not an act of violence. So anybody can do that. And that doesn't mean it's good if they do it. It doesn't mean it's smart if they can do it. You still get to condemn them and ridicule them and criticize them for doing that if you think that was dumb. Like what happened to Gina Carano was just colossally stupid. It was intellectually dishonest and moronic. And yet, that company had the right to fire her for a colossally stupid reason, because all that means is we're not going to trade with you anymore. Now, if there was breach of contract in there and stuff, I don't know. Like, I don't know the details of that. They may have done that, because breach of contract is you agreed to do this and then you didn't. And that's not okay. But if it's just, we're not hiring you again because of something you said, even if their reason is completely stupid, they have freedom of association too, or they're entitled to freedom of association. And so is she, and so are you, and so is everybody. And so if some other company fires somebody, fires Jimmy Kimmel for saying whatever about Charlie Kirk being murdered, they should have the ability to disassociate. Now, the question immediately becomes, okay, but were they pressured by government? Because then that stops being freedom of association and it starts to be government coercion. Especially if there was talk of, well, if you have this FCC license, maybe we're going to revoke your license and not let you broadcast stuff unless it's something the ruling class approves of. That is violence. That is a violation of the First Amendment and free speech and everything else. Now, I've heard some people say, but yeah, that didn't happen in Jimmy Kimmel. I have no stinking idea whether the FCC did it. Now, is Trump capable of that? Absolutely. The dumbass broadcasts it on a daily basis. He openly did the thing of saying, well, if you want to report on, was it like at the Pentagon, I think? Basically, you're going to report stories that the dictator approves of, or you get your credentials revoked and you don't get to interview us. That's not at all suspicious. So the news, in order to keep being the news and having inside reporters, have to kiss the ass of the machine. By the way, that's nothing new either. Right and left have done that forever. It was funny because for a different reason, I was just reminded of David K. Johnston, professional lying scumbag for the New York Times, who's just a propagandist for the federal extortion racket and the IRS. Lied his ass off in my case, just constantly. And golly gee, Commissioner of the IRS will return his calls. Kind of doubt he would return mine if I had called him. Because if you're saying things that the ruling class likes, well, then they let you in. You can talk to us. Because they do the preferential treatment. That's been going on like everywhere forever. Sometimes more subtly and sometimes more blatantly. But yeah, that's government coercion being used to control speech. Now, like I said, in the Jimmy Kimmel thing, I don't know if that happened at all. But Trump obviously has the mentality, if you say mean things about me, that's got to be illegal. He says that right out in the open, like a frickin' dictator. How dare it? It must be against the law for you to say bad things about his Lord High Emperor Mango Mussolini. We better send thugs of the state after. We better prosecute you. Him and his stooges have obviously demonstrated that mentality. So regardless of whether that happened in any particular case, Trump and his stooges are in no way pro-free speech at all, in any way, shape, or form. They don't give a shit about the First Amendment either. And they don't give a shit about freedom of association. So, remember back that stupid COVID circus? When there were companies that say, you can't come in here without a mask, if they do that on their own, they have the right to disassociate. They have the right to say, we're not going to let people in if you're not wearing a mask that provably doesn't do any good and is colossally stupid and was literally pushed by people in politics to remind you to be scared. That's the only reason there were ever mask mandates. But a bunch of leftist imbeciles fell for it, including the ones who run the Sprouts down the street from us. And they were absolutely obnoxious and stupid about it. If it was just their idea, they had the right to be obnoxiously stupid about it and not let people in. And we have the right to point out how colossally moronic that was, especially to a place that pretends to be about health and is that stupid that you're pushing something completely contrary to health and blindly worshiping experts who are telling people to do things which are horrendously destructive to their health. And I have the right to point that out, even while you have the right to moronically disassociate from people who didn't fall for that moronic crap. Now, if government puts pressure on businesses to do that, it stops being freedom of association. How much that happened with Sprouts and other companies, I don't know. They obviously did that. They obviously tried to put pressure on them. Now, sometimes government can do it by just calling the guy at the top and saying, hey, can you kind of sort of make this your policy? And the guy at the top who has political ties may go, well, yeah, the regulations and stuff that I want, I'm going to have to kiss the ruling class's butt to get them, so I better go along with it. So it's mafia-style coercion where it doesn't always have to come out as, do this or we hurt you. It's like, well, we have these favors, and we'll do you favors if you do us favors, like push this idiotic agenda to enrich big pharma and scare the crap out of people and let politicians grab a bunch of power to the detriment of the health and wealth and freedom of everybody else. So there are ways to influence people by way of government coercion that aren't even direct threats, and that becomes a big, muddy gray area of what actually happened. Then there's just direct influence and pressure, which totally happened under the Biden administration and got a bunch of videos taken down, including some of mine on YouTube. I had a video called Shutdowns, Stupid, Pointless, and Evil, or something like that. I still have the video, so I should post it again and see if they take it down again. They took it down. Everything in it was absolutely true, and it's still absolutely true, and they were pressured by government to censor something that was totally true. If the owners at YouTube were dumb enough to think, oh, we can't have him saying that, we're going to disassociate with this guy, that would be one thing. When government puts in pressure, that's censorship, that's coercion. Even if the violence isn't just, you're going to take that down and we're going to punch you out. It's, no, we're going to revoke your license or tax this or somehow needle you, because people in positions of power have lots of ways of harassing and needling people. And Trump is well aware of that and talks about that and advocates that on a regular basis. I mean, the thing of, it was Walmart. Who's the head dude at Walmart? I don't know, but they were, it wasn't even the main guy. Bezos? Or am I confusing him with somebody else? Doesn't seem to matter. Walmart was about to come out and say, we're going to tell people how much of these increased prices are from tariffs of Mango Mussolini making these things more expensive for Americans. And Trump calls the head of Walmart and says, don't do that, don't tell them. And because of the favoritism and the preference and the regulation and the ability to screw with them in 1,000 different ways, through tax laws, through regulations, he coerced Walmart into not doing that. Now, he probably didn't have to coerce them very much, because big corporations are very often buddies with government, because government also uses violence of the state to crush competition. So there's this gross, tangled pile of crap influence peddling going on. But that's a perfect example, and that wasn't even hidden. Like, oh, people are saying something true that makes Mango Mussolini look bad, so he goes to pressure private companies into not telling people something true because it makes the tyrant look bad. It's like, could you have a more obviously dictatorial mentality? Not really. So right now I see so many people on the left and right calling the other side hypocritical, which they both are, and they both are while they're saying that of the other one too. And of course, they all have a completely warped view of freedom of speech, because almost all of them actually advocate censorship in one form or another. To his credit, Charlie Kirk didn't. He was like, even totally mean, nasty, horrible, ugly things, people should be allowed to say that. So, good for him. A hell of a lot of conservatives, and right now anybody still supporting Trump does not at all believe in freedom of expression. And they're doing the thing back and forth of the liberals going, oh, how could you, Kimmel was just expressing an opinion, and how could you fire him for, by the way, his show was shit, and he was an idiot and a butt kisser for the Democratic parasitic puppets. But they're all lamenting, this is so unfair, this is censorship. Now, if somebody had gone to the FCC and said, fire him, or from the FCC had gone there and said, fire him or we're revoking your license, that would be coercion and censorship. I don't know if that happened. The thing is, all the liberals whining about that, they're all being quoted all over the place, celebrating when other people got silenced for saying things they think. So what it boils down to with Trump supporters and Democrats is people should be free to express anything they want unless I find it offensive, in which case they should be fired and harassed and condemned. The beauty of actually understanding freedom of association and freedom of speech is that it allows people with very different views to peacefully coexist. Now, peacefully coexist doesn't mean they like each other. It doesn't mean they agree with each other. It literally means they're both still existing without using violence against each other. That's all. That's a very low criteria. Peaceful coexistence doesn't mean peace on earth and everybody's happy and kumbaya and all that. It just means, okay, we're not in violent conflict, which is a pretty low bar. Zero statists can achieve even that pretty low bar. But even if you had people with very different opinions who actually understood and advocated freedom of speech and freedom of association, they could have peaceful coexistence, even while they're yelling at each other and calling each other dumbasses and evil pieces of crap. Because it may not be what you think of as peaceful in the general sense, but it's not an act of violence to verbally criticize somebody. So you can have people going, ha ha ha, I'm glad he got murdered, and other people going, you're the scum of the earth for saying that. And if both of them recognize you don't get to violently attack the other one for what they think, okay, you can have people mad at each other. It doesn't have to become violent. Unless you're a statist, and then everything you advocate becomes violence because it's by way of government, and everything government does is violence. It's a command. Every law is a command backed by the threat of violence. So all these people on the left and right complaining about freedom of speech and censorship, none of them actually believe in it. Well, very rarely a conservative like Charlie Kirk actually did believe in freedom of speech, like all the way. But just thought I'd quick do this video because holy smokes, the number of people who don't understand. And it doesn't mean you have to approve of somebody else's disassociation. Doesn't mean you're not allowed to criticize them. It means you're not allowed to punch them out for disassociating with somebody, no matter how dumb you think that is. If somebody said, we're not going to let you in our store, Larken, because you have red hair, I would say that's colossally stupid. I might even publicly go out and say how colossally stupid I think that is. But I'm not going to barge in, because it's not my property. You get to decide who to associate with. And if you take that to its logical conclusion, it freaks out all statists because it means extreme things like the racist, dumbass white guy who doesn't like black people is like, I don't let black people in my restaurant or whatever. That should not be responded to with violence. That's why the Civil Rights Act really was immoral BS. For the exact same reason as using violence against somebody for the color of their skin is evil BS. And government doesn't ever oppose violent aggression. It just decides which direction it's going to do it in. Like I always point out, they went from forced segregation to forced integration, never actually allowing freedom of association, which would have very quickly fixed almost all of that, even with dumbasses and racists and all that. And by the exact same token, if there's some black business owner who says, you know, I want to help my people get along and I'm only going to hire black people, I can say, I think that's kind of dumb in a way and kind of racist in a way, but also it's your company. I don't have the right to forcibly interfere with that. I can criticize you if I want to. I don't have the right to interfere. That's all. You get to say what you want. You don't get to violently interfere with other people. Why is that so hard for people to grasp? One more thing to demonstrate that neither side believes in freedom of association either. A while back, there was the bakery that didn't want to bake a cake for a gay wedding because of their beliefs, and they think that's a man and a man, that's not marriage, and we're not going to do a wedding cake. We do wedding cakes, we're not going to do that because we don't believe in that. They absolutely had the right of association and disassociation to decide that. But of course, government and the assholes who went to government to use the violence of government against those people to force them to make them a cake said, nope, you don't have freedom of association. Now, at the same time, again, anybody would have the right to come out and say, well, I think that's rude and obnoxious, and we have the right to not go to your bakery anymore because we don't like what you did, or anything of the sort. You get to exercise freedom of disassociation too. Well, yeah, see, that's how the left act. Now, was that Gary Johnson? I don't remember. No, maybe it was. I don't know. I don't even want to guess the name. Some libertarian imbecile was also, supposedly libertarian, was also like, yeah, bake their cake. It's like, you control freak dumbass. You don't understand freedom of association either. But in case you thought that was just a thing on the left, Pam Bondi came out. Apparently there was a company that didn't want to print a bunch of flyers for the Charlie Kirk event or morning or whatever it was. And she came out and threatened to prosecute them, which is the use of government violence for not wanting to trade with somebody. So yeah, Mango Mussolini and his stooges don't at all believe in freedom of association either. Nobody in government does. So once again, the road to peaceful coexistence is if everybody gets, if you go to a printer and they say, because of our beliefs, we don't want to do that, you can say, they're stupid. You can tell other people, they're stupid. Look at this stupid, obnoxious thing they do. Other people can decide whether to associate or not. You don't get to use violence against them, including by way of government. And if people understood that and abided by that, there would still be disagreements and there would be way less violence because people could decide who to associate with, who to disassociate with, and just let things settle out the way they do without any violence. And zero statists are capable of that.